Hi there. Today we're going to revisit a crime that sent shockwaves through South Korea in 2012. This wasn't just any case. It shook the public to its core and ended up changing how the country handles emergency calls forever. The story centers around the ethnic Korean Chinese community in South Korea. Though they share the same language and cultural roots as native Koreans, they are often seen as outsiders, living on the margins of society. The discrimination they face isn't always overt, rarely loud insults or direct attacks, but subtle and insidious, woven into the fabric of daily life. Then came the crime of 2012. And that quiet prejudice? It exploded. One man's horrific actions fueled nationwide judgment and suspicion toward an entire community. So what exactly happened that year? And why did it make everyday Koreans start questioning their police force's ability to respond to urgent calls? To understand that, we need to go back to one seemingly ordinary night. April 1st, 2011. Soft background music fades in. It was a Sunday evening. Nothing unusual, but at 10:50 p.m., the 112 emergency line, the Korean version of 911, rang. The dispatcher answered, only to be met with panic. On the other end of the call, a woman clearly terrified. She said she had just been assaulted by a man she didn't know. She was in such shock that she couldn't give her exact location. All she could say was that she was somewhere on the road between Gidong Elementary School and Mogok Park. While officers tried to pull more details from her, the call took a terrifying turn. There was a loud crashing noise, like a door being kicked open. Then her screams cut through the line. "I'm sorry, please, I'm sorry." A desperate woman pleading for her life. Back in 2011, South Korea's location tracking technology was still underdeveloped. The police couldn't trace the caller's exact location through her phone signal. All they could do was check the phone's registration information. They learned the number was under the name Ms. Wu, with an address in Gwon City, North Jeolla Province. Immediately, the Gyeonggi police called the Gunsan Police Department to report the case. But when Gunsan officers contacted Ms. Wu's family, they learned something troubling. She didn't live in Gwon anymore. She had moved to Suwon City. That discovery cost them more time. Red tape, interdepartment miscommunication, and jurisdiction confusion all slowed the process down. Almost 2 hours after the original emergency call at 12:55 a.m., the Suwon Central Police Station finally received the alert and was ordered to search the area described by the victim. But there was another problem. They still didn't have a specific address, just a rough stretch between a school and a park. Still, they acted. 11 officers were dispatched and began searching the neighborhood near Gidong Elementary School. But they were effectively searching blind. There were no signs of a struggle, no obvious clues. The only real hope came from Wu's older sister, who, after hearing what happened, rushed to join the search party. She knew the area better than anyone. Since it was a residential neighborhood and already late at night, officers had to move quietly. They pressed their ears against doors and windows, trying to detect any unusual sounds without disturbing the public. Minute after minute, second after second passed, but they found nothing. At 2:32 a.m., 2 more police teams were called in, bringing the total number of searchers to 21 officers. 8 hours after the initial emergency call, they deployed 2 patrol cars specifically to comb the area near Mogok Park. Still, nothing. Even as late as 9 a.m., a full 10 hours after Wu had called for help, the chief of Suwon Central Police Station personally joined the search. But it didn't help. They still couldn't find her. Officers showed her photo to residents around the area, but no one recognized her. Then, at 11 a.m., a breakthrough. A local resident, when asked by officers, casually complained that he couldn't sleep the night before. He said he had been kept up by a couple in the building next door, arguing loudly. He hoped the police could stop by and ask them to quiet down. That tip, seemingly unimportant, turned out to be a major lead. The man owned a paint shop and had spent the night there. Next to the shop was a metal gate, and behind that gate was a narrow walkway leading to a small residential building. The noises he heard had come from the ground floor apartment of that building. Officers knocked on the apartment door. No one answered. But the paint shop owner insisted. The arguing definitely came from that unit. He had heard a man and a woman. The woman had been sobbing, crying out, "I'm sorry. Please forgive me." And since that morning, he hadn't seen anyone come in or out of that apartment. As the officers listened to his account, one line stuck with them. That plea, "I'm sorry, I was wrong." It matched exactly what Wu had screamed during the emergency call. Officers immediately announced their presence and warned, "If you don't open the door, we'll break it down." A moment later, the door opened. A middle-aged man stepped out, calm, composed. But as the door swung wider, a powerful stench of blood hit the officers like a wall. They rushed inside. It was a small apartment. The front door opened straight into the kitchen. To the right, a tiny bathroom. Straight ahead, a small bedroom. And in that bedroom, something horrifying. Almost the entire room was taken up by a large shape, wrapped in a white sheet. The smell confirmed their worst fear. This was a crime scene. They lifted the sheet. Beneath it lay a corpse, barely recognizable. Most of the flesh had been stripped off, leaving mostly bare bone. Next to the body were 3 black plastic bags. Inside them, dozens and dozens of meat-like chunks. After counting, police found a total of 280 separate pieces of flesh, all meticulously sliced from the body. But the victim's face was still intact. And that was how they identified her. It was Wu, the woman who had called for help just the night before. Wu, the victim, was a woman in her late 20s. She worked at a mobile parts manufacturing plant. Her life was simple and quiet, split between her factory job and her apartment. She had no known enemies, no complicated relationships, no history of conflict with anyone. The autopsy revealed that she had died around 5 a.m. That meant she had survived for nearly 6 hours after calling for help. As for the man who opened the door, he confessed without resistance. His name was Won-chun, a 42-year-old man born in Inner Mongolia, China. O had only completed elementary school before dropping out to farm. 5 years prior to the murder, he had come to South Korea on a work visa and took up construction jobs. His family, his wife and child, were still in China, so he regularly traveled back and forth between the two countries. Before the murder, he was living a transient lifestyle, doing odd jobs for money. Co-workers described him as shy, reserved, even kind. He rarely spoke but was known to pay for others' meals. No one ever suspected he harbored such a dark and twisted mind. Despite his humble background, O's income wasn't low, but disturbingly, over 20% of it went towards soliciting sex. On average, he spent about 400,000 won a month, nearly 300 USD, on prostitution. Over time, this built a warped belief in his mind. That money entitled him to sex. He became addicted, watching porn on his phone constantly, several times a day. O was ethnically Korean Chinese, so his Korean was fluent. He had no trouble communicating. He told police what happened that night. His version of events went like this. On April 1st, after finishing his shift, he came home, ate some meat, watched movies, and felt great. After dinner, he stepped outside for a walk, leaning against a wall near the gate, smoking a cigarette. That's when he said he accidentally bumped into Woo as she walked by. According to O, he bowed and apologized immediately, but Woo, he claimed, cursed at him and berated him in public. He said he panicked, afraid others would hear, so he tried to calm her down, but he alleged she became more aggressive, and in a fit of impulse, he dragged her into his apartment. There, under the light, he noticed she was pretty. He then offered her money for sex. Woo refused and allegedly demanded 2 million won, about 1,700 US dollars. That made him furious. He said he then sexually assaulted her while she sobbed and warned him that she'd call the police. Fearing arrest, O said he killed her. Afterward, he took her cash and gold necklace. Based on his account, it sounded like a spontaneous crime, a violent reaction to a heated moment. The case was seemingly solved in a day. The killer was caught. Police even proudly touted the efficiency of their investigation. Woo's family didn't buy O's story. Her father described her as respectful, gentle, and kind-hearted. He said Woo would never curse at a stranger, especially not the way O had claimed. Her behavior that night, according to O, simply didn't fit her personality. So the family demanded a deeper investigation. Faced with their pressure, the police agreed to check nearby security camera footage, and what they found completely changed the case. The footage came from a rear camera at Gidong Elementary School, about 50 meters from the crime scene. The video was grainy, but after some digital enhancement, they could clearly see what happened. At 10:32 p.m. on the night of April 1st, Woo was walking calmly down the street. Then from the shadows, Won-chun suddenly emerged. He grabbed her, pulled her to the ground, and dragged her toward his apartment. It was a planned ambush. He had been lying in wait behind a utility pole, in Woo's blind spot. This wasn't a chance encounter. It was a premeditated attack. Everything O had told police was a lie. And if Woo's family hadn't pushed for a second look, the truth might never have come to light. When Woo's younger brother saw the footage, he broke down in tears. He said his sister lived frugally. She wore the same outfit nearly every day. That might have made her a routine target. O could have observed her habits, followed her over time, and waited for the right moment to strike. Because of the dismemberment, it took days of forensic work to officially confirm the cause of death: asphyxiation. She had been strangled to death. But then something even more disturbing surfaced. Police found 11 small bone fragments in the bathroom drain. But here's the twist. Those bones didn't belong to Woo. Faced with this evidence, O finally broke down and admitted to what really happened. And none of it matched his original story. With the evidence stacked against him, O finally confessed. And this time, his account aligned with the security footage. At around 10:30 p.m., he saw Woo walking by his apartment. He rushed out from behind the utility pole and dragged her inside. His goal was sexual assault. But when he tried, Woo resisted. O locked her in the bedroom, then went into the bathroom. That's when Woo saw her only chance. She locked the bedroom door from the inside and called 112, the emergency number. O heard the door lock click. He panicked. He tried to break it open, but Woo was bracing it with all her strength. So O opened the small sliding window between the kitchen and the bedroom, reached through, grabbed her by the hair, and threatened her. Eventually, he broke down the door. To prevent her from escaping, he bound her with duct tape, beat her, and threw her onto the bed. At around 3 a.m., he made another attempt to assault her, but again, he failed. Frustrated, he grabbed a wrench and smashed it into Woo's head. Then he strangled her to death. And then came the most gruesome part. He watched porn on his phone as he used kitchen knives to dismember her body. As for the mysterious bones found in his bathroom drain, he claimed he didn't know where they came from and insisted Woo was the only person he had ever killed. But the damage was done. News of the murder spread fast, and so did the outrage. The Korean public wasn't just enraged by Won-chun's brutality, they were furious at the police's failure. Let's rewind the timeline. 10:50 p.m., Woo calls 112 at 11 a.m. the next day. Police finally locate the crime scene. 12 hours later, the autopsy showed Woo died at around 5 a.m. That means she was alive for nearly 6 hours after making the emergency call. If she had been found earlier, she could have been saved. But police wasted critical time. They spent almost 2 hours verifying Woo's personal info, instead of launching an immediate search based on the location she gave. Between Gidong Elementary and Mogok Park, a zone less than 1 kilometer wide. And the crime scene? Just 600 meters from the nearest police station. Despite that, they failed to find her. Police later claimed they checked every building with lights on that night, including knocking on O's door. But the paint shop owner next door said otherwise. He stayed open until 12:30 a.m. and never saw any officers searching the area. Even Woo's sister, who was helping with the search, gave damning testimony. She said she was riding in a police car with 2 officers that passed within 20 meters of the crime scene multiple times. But she later realized those 2 officers were dozing off in the front seat. They seemed completely unbothered. Many people argued that the fastest way to find a missing person was to check surveillance footage immediately. But in Woo's case, police didn't review any video early on. Or if they did, it was too late. Under intense public pressure, on April 4th, just 3 days after the murder, the police held a press conference and issued a formal apology. They claimed that the call between Woo and the dispatcher had lasted only 15 seconds and that O had cut it short, preventing Woo from giving enough detail. But that contradicted O's confession. He had told investigators that after breaking into the bedroom, he didn't notice Woo's phone at all. He only found it after killing her, tucked away in a corner. By that time, the screen had gone dark, and he hadn't realized she'd called the police. So clearly, the call hadn't been cut off that early. Over the next few days, the police changed their story multiple times. From 15 seconds, they revised the call duration to 1 minute 20 seconds and finally admitted it lasted a full 7 minutes and 36 seconds. Woo's family demanded the entire audio recording, but police refused, citing privacy laws and the potential for public distress. Sales of self-defense products, pepper spray, personal alarms, stun guns skyrocketed across South Korea. On one popular online forum, a disturbing post began trending. A user, clearly unwell, wrote, "I just broke up with my girlfriend. I feel awful. I want to do something even more shocking than what Won-chun did." He added, "I'll kill the first woman I see near exit 4 of a subway station." The post caused mass panic, but police moved quickly. They tracked the IP address, arrested the user, and found he had no weapons or actual plan. He later said he was depressed and had posted the message as a joke. He claimed he didn't realize the impact it would have. Still, it underscored something chilling. The case had unleashed something dark, a surge of fear, instability, and copycat behavior. Now, people began questioning not only the police's actions, but also Won-chun's true motive. Was this really just a failed assault? Or was it something even darker? People were starting to wonder, was Won-chun's real motive just sexual assault? There were parts of the crime that didn't add up. Stood nearly 1.8 meters tall and weighed over 80 kilograms. He had a muscular build from years of manual labor. The night of the murder, he managed to drag Woo for dozens of meters and then tie her up tightly with duct tape. But the most disturbing part was how he handled her body. If he had simply wanted to dispose of her remains, he could have cut them into large chunks. Quick and simple. But went further, much further. He peeled back the skin, removed fat tissue, and then sliced the meat into uniform pieces, neatly shaped and consistent in size, all done with a kitchen knife. It was almost like he was butchering an animal. That's when rumors began to swirl. Was he cannibalizing his victim or harvesting her organs to sell on the black market? Security footage from the day of the crime showed something else. Another woman had passed by the same alley just minutes earlier. Was she nearly a victim too? Was Woo just in the wrong place at the wrong time? And then there were the 11 bone fragments found in O's bathroom, bones that didn't belong to Woo. Was this really his first crime? Or was he a serial killer who had struck before, possibly even back in China? Theories flew across news sites and online forums, but investigators found no solid evidence that he had committed any previous murders. Eventually, forensic testing solved the mystery of the 11 bone fragments. They turned out to be animal bones, from chickens, pigs, and other sources. Still, the fear lingered. Why did he keep them in the bathroom drain? Why did he show no remorse? 2 months later, in June 2012, his trial began at the Suwon District Court. The charges: murder, mutilation of a corpse, suspected trafficking of human parts. While being transported to court, got into a fight with another inmate. The man, in for drug trafficking, was disgusted by O's behavior, smirking and tapping his legs as he stared at women outside the prison van. The inmate snapped, "Are you Won-chun? Stop bouncing your leg. Sit still and reflect on your sins." Lunged at him. A scuffle broke out before guards stepped in and separated them. During the trial, the judge asked, "Why did you confess so quickly?" He replied, "Because I know I committed the crime. I wanted to apologize." When asked why he dismembered the victim so cruelly, he said, "I wasn't in a good mood." Prosecutors showed surveillance footage and audio from Woo's 112 call in court. As the evidence played, remained expressionless. But Woo's family, they collapsed in grief. Their lives had been destroyed. Woo's mother sobbed uncontrollably, begging the judge to punish him to the fullest extent of the law. After hearing all the evidence, the premeditated ambush, the brutal killing, the mutilation, the judge made his ruling. He described Won-chun as a morally bankrupt individual, a killer who not only took a life, but cut the victim into hundreds of pieces, possibly to sell body parts or even consume them. He said there was a real possibility that had planned to distribute human flesh. Even after his arrest, had shown no remorse. The judge concluded, the death penalty is unavoidable. And with that, Won-chun was sentenced to death for the murder of Woo. Upon hearing the verdict, closed his eyes and bowed his head in silence, but not for long. He soon filed an appeal. Wu's family said they had hoped Oh would pay the ultimate price for what he did, but they were also left with lingering questions. Her younger brother said, "We still don't know his real motive. We don't know if he acted alone. Everything happened too fast." He wondered if Oh might have been part of a larger ring, an underground network trafficking in human flesh or organs. But in the appellate court, the judge offered a different view. Yes, Oh's actions were unspeakably cruel, the court said, but there was no solid evidence proving he had tried to sell meat or organs. They acknowledged that Oh had committed murder, but noted it was also his first criminal offense. In their eyes, the death penalty was too harsh. So the court commuted his sentence from death to life in prison. The ruling sparked immediate backlash. People felt the courts were putting the killer's human rights above the victim's life. Wu's family took action again. This time, they filed a lawsuit against government agencies, demanding 360 million won, around 270,000 USD, in compensation. They argued that Wu's death was a direct result of police negligence and the failure to act swiftly. But the court rejected their claim, stating, even if police had responded better, there's no guarantee Wu could have been saved. The decision outraged the public once more. Eventually, after another appeal, the Supreme Court of South Korea acknowledged the police's failures and ordered the government to pay the family 80 million won, around 64,000 USD. After the sentencing, Oh Won-chun's name became one of the most searched in South Korea. He was transferred to North Gyeongsang Prison No. 1, a high-security facility housing some of the country's most notorious criminals, including Cho Do-soon, the convicted child predator depicted in the film Hope, and Yoo Young-chol, a known serial killer. Some even began to compare Oh to those monsters, debating where he ranked among Korea's most heinous offenders. One inmate who had shared a cell with Oh later told reporters, "He didn't seem remorseful. He exercised every day like he was preparing to get out and avoid revenge." In contrast, some claimed that Oh would bow his head and apologize aloud to Wu 108 times a day as a form of penance. Regardless of what was real or performative, public hatred for Oh Won-chun was cemented. But there was another consequence, a deeply troubling one: Oh's ethnicity. He was a Korean-Chinese immigrant, born in Inner Mongolia. Before this case, South Korea had a complicated view of the Korean-Chinese community. On one hand, they were considered ethnic brothers. On the other, many Koreans viewed them with distrust, especially for allegedly favoring China's interests. This horrific crime amplified those tensions. One user on a Korean forum wrote, "I'm not afraid of men with scary faces. But if he's Korean Chinese, then I'm scared." Of course, not everyone agreed with that sentiment. Others argued, "You can't judge an entire group based on one man's actions." Still, the damage was done. Discrimination grew worse, and many Korean Chinese residents were left feeling scapegoated and alienated. But amid the tragedy and anger, there were some changes, and they mattered. Wu's murder forced the Korean government to reform its emergency call system. Previously, police couldn't track a caller's location without their explicit consent. They worried about privacy violations and government overreach. After Wu's case, the government passed the 112 location law. Under this new law, police were granted permission to immediately trace the location of any 112 emergency caller in life-threatening situations, even if their phone was turned off. Location accuracy was improved to within 10 meters. But the reforms didn't stop there. the national police also overhauled internal training. Emergency call centers across the country were given a new operations manual outlining clear procedures for handling different types of cases. The guide emphasized one key principle: never waste time repeating useless questions. Always prioritize the safety of the caller. In addition, they introduced a color-coded system for classifying 112 calls from Level 1, highest emergency, to Level 5, least urgent. This system helped dispatchers allocate resources more efficiently and ensured faster response times for serious crimes in progress. But not all the government's responses were well received. In what many saw as an attempt to redirect public anger away from the police, officials began talking about new crime prevention measures, targeting foreigners. The messaging raised serious concerns among human rights groups. Activists pointed out that the real issue wasn't immigration, but the incompetence and cover-ups by the police. One official statement summed it up: "The core of this tragedy lies in the flawed emergency response, not the nationality of the killer." And they were right. The most heartbreaking part of this case wasn't just what Oh did. It was the fact that Woo's desperate cry for help was never answered. She had done everything right. She escaped. She locked herself in. She called the police. She begged for her life, and no one came. She waited. She hoped. And in the end, she died alone, terrified and betrayed. Her death became a national wake-up call. The case exposed deep flaws in Korea's emergency call system, training standards, and police protocols. It showed how easily things can fall apart when people in charge lack urgency, skill, or compassion. It revealed the dangers of prioritizing procedure over people and the deadly consequences of bureaucratic delay. Even when Woo had given clear information, her general location, her condition, and her attacker's presence, dispatchers and officers failed to act effectively. The fact that her sister and 2 officers passed within 20 meters of the crime scene, but did nothing, was a failure beyond comprehension. Meanwhile, the dispatcher who took her call kept asking the same question, offering no guidance or support. His mistake wasn't just technical, it was human. He lacked the instinct, the training, and maybe even the care to realize that someone was dying on the other end of the line. All of this showed one painful truth. Without proper training, accountability, and reform, no emergency system can truly protect its citizens. Woo's case wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a systemic failure. A failure that demanded more than apologies. It demanded change. In the wake of Woo's murder, the Korean National Police undertook a massive internal restructuring. Call center agents received updated training manuals with strict protocols for handling different types of emergency situations. These new guidelines emphasized: never ask redundant questions. Never assume the caller is exaggerating. Always prioritize their safety first. A new color-coded alert system was introduced. Level 1 for life-threatening crimes needing immediate response. Level 5 for non-emergency calls like minor consultations. This change allowed police to better allocate resources and respond faster to high-priority cases. But some wondered if all this reform was just a distraction, a way to shift the narrative and hide how badly the police had failed. Especially when they began promoting crime prevention for foreigners instead of addressing the systemic incompetence that had cost Woo her life. Human rights groups responded swiftly. They said the true issue wasn't ethnicity. It was a crisis in accountability. And they were right. This wasn't just about a brutal killer. This was about a system that let her die while she waited for someone, anyone, to come save her. She did everything she could. She was brave, she fought, she called for help, and no one came. That's what shook a nation. Woo's voice, trembling, pleading, breaking, still echoes across South Korea. Her death was more than a tragedy. It was a test of institutions, of empathy, of whether human lives really matter more than red tape. The reforms that followed, the GPS tracking law, the dispatcher training, the response classification system, all of them carry her legacy. They are the product of her suffering, but it shouldn't have taken that much pain to make them happen. We're left with one final haunting truth. If the system had been better, she would still be alive. The Woo case is more than a headline or a tragedy. It's a wake-up call. It revealed painful gaps in South Korea's emergency response system and the human cost of bureaucratic failure. It showed us the critical importance of training, accountability, and empathy in every link of the chain, from the dispatcher taking the call to the officers sent into the field. It reminded us that behind every number, every 112 call is a real person, someone who might be begging for help, fighting for their life. Woo waited. She hoped. She cried out for help. And though no one answered in time, her story changed the system for the better. Her voice still echoes in the reforms, the laws, and the hearts of those who vowed to do better. This case is a stark reminder. We must never take our emergency systems for granted. We must demand better training, more transparency, and unwavering commitment to saving lives. Only then can we hope to prevent another tragedy like Woo's. Thank you for watching today's video. If you found this story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next time with more stories that matter. Until then, stay safe, and remember, every call for help deserves to be heard. Goodbye.